We both made it. Well, okay, she's in her right place. I am clearly traveling around and back in my mom's basement. Offering Merry Christmas.
The Christmas basement.
And summer and whenever I happen to show up back down on Route 60. We stopped. Okay, so you drive down Route 66, right? We stopped properly at Uranus Fudge Factory, spelled like the planet. Don't get any ideas, right? The poor staff have to.
You've made that place famous.
Hey, I should, maybe that's what I'll use for our cover for this episode, right? The Uranus Fudge Factory. And this time I actually had time to stop and, properly shop and, a garden gnome may have been purchased. Olives. Nice. There were garlic stuffed olives. They're very tasty. Fudge, the fudge is good. Various games and puzzles, it's like it was the faux version of every gift shop ever along Middle America Route 66. Yes, I did it. I came out with heaving bags full of Christmas presents, which turned out good because everybody in the house got sick and no Christmas shopping happened except for my going to the mall. On Christmas, the 23rd, right, the day before Christmas Eve. So we have had.
Yeah. Do you guys have the crazy rushes in the malls there?
Well, I hadn't been to a mall in a long time. So this mall, so we actually do we always, because we care about you guys, plan ahead for the topic that we're going to cover in tonight's episode. We do actually have a plan for this one, which we may get to. Who knows, right? But since
we aim
to, and I managed to mess up the opening and not give you my little, cryptic, who knows what we're going to talk about, run credits. No, we're just here tonight. Because programming must continue, even if Rachel's tech skills flutter about in many fashions. However, since this is our last episode of 2023, which will end memorably on December 31st with the Americanized date form of 123-123. Ooh, isn't that cool, right? 12/31/23.
Yeah.
How often does that happen? Well, it happened 100 years ago, right? So we figured we
once in a century.
What?
Are we gonna celebrate the numbers, the special numerology?
Yes. Well, we're gonna celebrate time travel and backstory and exactly where are we. I when I was in there's a very nice dog park in the town where my mom is, and I was wandering around the dog park today thinking, what can we possibly do? And I realized I want to predict the future, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I'm a historian. That's right. I don't know how to predict the future. I'm like reading Alexander Macree's Contemplations on the Tree of Woe, and he's done a very good post for the end of the year with his predictions of what's going to happen. World War III, we're in it.
Oh, goody.
Well, he did predict the fall of the dollar last year, so he's doing pretty well right now. And then I was like, well, we could play at predicting the future. How and then I couldn't find a Bitmoji that showed the crystal ball anymore. They seem to have lost it. So we just count down, I guess, to wherever we're going. Anyway, that was a long riff on going to the mall. The mall was actually built when I was here in high school. So this is a historic mall that I went shopping in. It was built when I was in high school. All the rats ran on. We had a cat at that point that was a good hunter, and rats appeared, dead ones.
Oh, he was bringing presents.
Oh, it was a she. Kitty. Her very well-crafted name was Kitty, and she showed up with lots of rats, which apparently fled from the construction. I remember those rats. clean
Wow.
from the construction of the mall. Anyway, so now I went to the mall, which has gone through a facelift and a rearrangement of anchor stores and stuff like that. And some of the shops
Mm.
are the same as the ones that were there when I was growing up, but all of the people are different.
Mm.
This neighborhood has changed a lot in the last. Well, I graduated from high school in 1982, so.
So from early 80s to now, what do you notice
It
the difference?
well, the mall is now very cosmopolitan, that's for sure. Which is pretty interesting going, because we're not really on a port here. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere. Well, I suppose we're on a port of the Route 66 railway line, right? And it's clear. I mean, there was one shop that was, had dragon in the title. I should have been taking photos. Dragon. I bought some good luck elephants there.
Beautiful.
Maybe, I don't know. They were gold. There's a set of them. There's like 8 of them. You could put them in a row. I was in ornamental mode. So there you go. Elephants.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, the homewares. The homewares kicks in. The homewares cravings kick in around the holidays.
Well, okay, but they're also, so I don't know what you have in Australia in terms of mall, but back in the 70s, when all the malls were really like being built, 70s and 80s, the 70s mall that we had in Louisville, that before we moved here, had a gift shop called Spencer's. Did you ever have Spencer's gift shops?
I don't think so.
Blacklight posters. Just think that.
Oh, okay.
In the malls, right? They're always in the malls, and the one here has lots of piercing jewelry, which I kind of want a better ring for my ear, but I don't think they had any diamonds, so just that, there were a variety of T-shirts, some Christian, some the opposite, all jumbled together, right? And then of course I was looking for posters, because there are people in my orbit that need new posters, and I found a Jefferson Airplane Alice in Wonderland Feed Your Head. This was good shopping.
Psychedelic homewares.
But I think that Spencer's has been there since the mall opened, so that wasn't new. And the Dragon shop, I think, has been there for quite some time. So it was interesting. It's like I could feel the change. Oh, I mean, there's a lot more Catholic stuff there than there was when I was growing up. How's that?
It's interesting.
In a mall. Yeah, in a mall.
You would never see that in Australia.
Well, the Dragon shop one, okay, so where I got the nice elephants, had lots of nice elephants. That was good. Had lots of posters of, I mean, Elvis was one of them, but I'm assuming there were other figures of cultural attention at the moment. I didn't see any yay posters, so consider, right? But
depending on what he's tweeted, it's either on the shop floor or in the back room.
There weren't any blanks in the display, so I don't know where whether they rapidly were pulling things down or not. So Casey says, I remember Spencer's gifts. It was right next to the merry-go-round clothes. Right, that sounds about right. Got my lava lamp at Spencer's. Ken, they still had them. There's more. You could get a new lava lamp. Ken, did you throw the axes? They used to have axe throwing in Uranus, at least. I didn't see the axe throwing. I didn't go into the sideshow. I just went into the actual proper fudge shop with the gifts and everything. So I will consider. We go down that road regularly, so we could stop again and find the axes. I did, however, for one of my gifts in the mall, I got some throwing stars. So we're on the right wavelength here. Right. Anyway, the posters in the Dragon shop were all of people smoking. it was stunning to me. I mean, there was some nice, you know, Virgin of Guadalupe's and things like that, but the general vibe of the shop was cigarettes. There's all these like influencers smoking. The Joker, I wish I, you know, had more cultural cachet. I have no idea who most of these characters were, but I did notice the cigarettes. There were some Godfathers.
They're all smokers.
They're all smokers. All smokers. So smoking is clearly, yeah. The Spencer's is not really a good indicator because that's like a perennial of these malls from the 70s, right? The sort of lava lamps and piercings, and you see, I knew what they were all along. There's the lingerie and toys in the back.
Oh, gotcha. So it's just various shades of hedonism from the front door to the back.
Yes, in the mall. Yes.
Gotcha.
I mean, but you know, the department stores. I was also listening. I've been listening to E. Michael Jones talk some, and he was talking about how his memory of Christmas from the 50s was department stores, and indeed, yeah, the department store, the anchor stores on the mall. You know, they didn't have the kind of displays we have in Chicago for sure. They weren't up there, but all the staff were wearing sweaters with pictures on them. and sometimes 3-dimensional stuff too, Christmas trees with ornaments and tinsel and stuff. Everyone was trying very hard.
We don't get to do the sweaters thing as much as you guys because it's usually very hot here during Christmas. But we're having a freak weather change, which a lot of people, I mean, everyone in Australia will know.
It hailed.
But if anyone's had a look at the weather down here, oh yeah, it hailed. So we had a white Christmas, which was hail the size of our entire hand, basically. There was a cyclone that has destroyed half of the state of Queensland. The state of Victoria had a crazy storm. It's just been cold and wet. There's no summer whatsoever. So this is probably the only Christmas I can remember here for a while where we can do the woolen jumpers with the crazy stuff on it. Yeah, because we usually don't. By the time Christmas Day rolls around here, we're all in thongs or flip-flops, as you guys call them.
Yeah, thongs are something else. Thongs are what you buy at Spencer's in the back.
Yeah, we don't need to go to Spencer's for our thongs. And you know, we're like in bikinis at the beach and stuff. So yeah, we're aligning with you guys, and yeah, I saw a few cool jumpers, but usually you don't get to see a lot of them. We're usually in like pastel beachwear by this time of year. Yeah.
Well, so you have the California
malls.
Christmas. I mean, it never gets snow there. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
So
no shoes.
No, yeah.
Usually the time of year where you can just throw your shoes away, which is really nice.
So what do we think is going to happen in the future?
Oh. Well, weather reports in Australia indicate that we're probably going to be in the middle of another cyclone. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen? Shall we play prediction?
We can't. So
I don't know if I want to get. I don't know if I want to.
I'm not sure I want to play prediction because I don't know if I'm any good at it. But I was thinking, it's like, if we've streamed for a year and 4 months, as it were, right? 5 months, not quite a year and a half. And I was actually thinking back. It's like, what did we stream about in 2023? It's been a wild year, right?
Yeah.
So I'm back at the beginning of the year again, not watching rom-coms this time. This time I was watching Patrick Coffin and Tony Eastland's Christmas shows recommended. And we can report that Jimmy Stewart in Shop Around the Corner, set in Budapest, interestingly, is actually really good. That was the best of the ones we saw. Yeah, that one was excellent. Very nicely done. But making me think about shops and All these ones from the 40s. We could do another episode on those. So thinking about what happened with the movies, what we've done with. I mean, we've done various episodes on Easter and meditations on Christ. We had Barbie.
We did
Barbie. We did a lot of Barbie. and our greatest hits, like what men want and what women want. Clearly, people see. The thing is, I think we're not actually serving our public properly if we don't tell them the future and what they want. They watch us to know what they want, so we need to tell them what they want. We haven't revisited the yay episodes, but we're attending to know that we've been doing our study, and we both have books to show off that we've been reading. Now, Kiltz has just found the book that she pulled off the shelf, and which is very interesting.
Yeah,
we can promise this for the future. We're gonna know more stuff. How's that? That's our first.
Well, in order to know the future, you have to know the past, right? And see, you're a professional predictor of the past. So I found this in the bookstore the other day. I didn't buy it just because I'm hating on the Anglos all the time, although
except you are, but that's okay.
I am, but it's okay. It's because of the blurb, which I thought was fantastic, because we found a kindred spirit in Neil Ferguson, who says the blurb for this book is Empire is one of the most successful and controversial history books of recent years, brilliantly retelling the story of Britain's imperial past. It shows how a gang of buccaneers and gold diggers from a rainy island in the North Atlantic came to build the most powerful empire in all history, how it ended, and how, for better or worse, it made our world what it is today. So, pirates and gold diggers, buccaneers and gold diggers. And I thought, no, I must own this for the blurb alone. So I'll be going through that soon.
Yes, good. But the thing is, why do you even need to? We already knew it. Clearly, if you're watching us,
true,
you have such high quality, predictions and study that one of the best, British historians in the world can't beat us. At least this penguin blurb can't.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can predict we're going to be reading more about the Empire. That's
yes,
cool.
Always reading more about the Empire.
Yeah. And we should say we have, even though under stress of COVID and travel and Christmas celebrations and so forth, we are continuing to work on Act 2 of Draco Alchemicus. Act 1, those of you who are desperately hoping to get the books, we're beginner Kickstarters. Just saying. There's always another step that we haven't considered that we need to deal with, and we're working through all of those. We have the books; they're all packaged up. We need to figure out how to charge you all for the shipping, which meant that I don't have that book to show to the camera, but I spent the last week reading David Graeber's Debt, the first 5,000 years. Yes, and I was actually reading it as it's a sort of like corollary to E. Michael Jones's Bare and Metal, right? Because E. Michael Jones's Bare and Metal is a great history of usury, capitalism, and labor and such. Graeber, I was reading a little book, The Utopia of Rules, that he talks about bureaucracy, and that started turning into things that we are definitely going to be able to use in Draco Alchemicus in the way that things play out for the characters once they get to Act 3, which is called The Market. Right, so we're having to learn about various things about finances and pirating and gold digging and mining and such like that. So the bureaucracy came into it, and then my husband had debt already, so I was like, okay, I need to read it. Well, my mom had a copy, so I read her copy, and he was a graduate student of Marshall Solins at the University of Chicago. I knew Marshall because Marshall was like one of the most famous professors we have. I actually had read one of Marshall Solins's very famous books, a little one, in college when I took some anthropology classes. Graeber studied with Solons. He also studied with the Komarovs, who did a lot of work on Africa, and he did his field work in Madagascar. And then somehow managed to both get a job at Yale and not get tenure at Yale, which is don't know what else there was.
Incredibly lucky and unlucky.
Something like that. And then got later hired at, I think, London School of Economics, definitely in London, and started writing these mind-blowing books on the anthropology of debt and market and slavery, sort of reintegrating the economic into all of these other human systems. But I've been sharing some of what I read on that with the group, and just mind blown over how we need to rethink what money is, which is one of the things that Alexander was doing on Contemplations of the Tree of Woe. We've all been thinking about this. It's like, we've gone off the gold standard. Now we're on all this fiat currency. The world, the Russia, China and Iran and Russia, they're all, trading without the dollar. Everything's going to... Graeber died in 2020. So he hasn't... he was one of the ones who actually organized Occupy in 2011 in New York. Yeah. So he's like... And his book on debt came out that year. So in 2008. And the book
so he's missing the BRICS revolution in real time.
Yeah. I mean, and I can't. It's it's terrible that he died, because he'd be watching all of this and being able to see what's going on. Because his prediction in debt was, we've gone from a period in which gold, the coinage and bullion was central to the system, to now we're not. And he was confidently back in 2011, predicting, no, we could be on this for another 500 years. It's just at the beginning. And I'm like, well, it's all crashing down right now, 10 years later. Be careful what you modest little prediction that you made of the sort of, who knows what we're going to see. Well, we're going to see what happens in... I mean, what's funny about this is his okay, so I didn't plan to talk about this because I haven't absorbed it properly yet, but he has several big cycles, and he says money starts actually out of it's not out of it's not out of the myth of barter, and it's not out of markets coming out of this exchange and having to be there's everything starts out much more personal, and in fact develops out of the commutation of brides into slave girls. I know, mind blown. Have to sit down and unpack all of this, but so that actual money doesn't come in until centuries after you've already got systems of credit and the use of human beings. It's like the prime unit of value in all human exchanges is a young woman. And with bride gifts, that's proving that there's no way you can actually pay anybody back for that. With slavery, it's obviously the inversion, as claiming that you can have someone who is only worth their body, as opposed to a bride who is worth all of her relations and all of her ability to have children and all of the human interactions that you have because of a network of associations. Slaves are ripped out of all of that and turned into pure body. And that money develops out of that kind of transformation. Coinage is actually the way that you have empires, massive armies, and markets, because markets develop in order to allow the soldiers who have plundered all the gold to buy stuff.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
So that there's all these other kinds of interactions before the state gets involved. The state gets involved in order to give the army stuff to buy, and that imperial coinage period is like the 500 BC to 500 AD period. 1,000 years. And then the next 1,000 years, I like this, right? The Middle Ages, when all those coin economies collapse,
Mm-hmm.
you don't revert to barter as such, but you go back to a kind of more local credit associations and such, and that
Mm-hmm.
it was a nice book to find out that the Middle Ages were actually the good period. Although it's complicated because he doesn't think it's Europe that's a good period. He thinks it's India and China, but never mind. And
Okay.
and then that our empire, pirates, gold digging, mining, that economy all
Yeah.
starts in the 16th century, just as we've been talking about, specifically with the Spanish conquest of the New World and all the silver and gold that they pull out of North and South America. But this was the tidbit that I thought was most interesting. All of the silver and gold that comes from South America goes through Spain. Some of it's stolen by pirates and taken to England. Guess where most of it ends up?
I'll say England. No, not England. Where does it go?
China.
Ah!
Most of the South American silver ends up in China. And most of the gold, he says, completely offhand, ends up in Hindu temples. They trade it all to Asia to get the spices and slaves and all of this stuff, right? So
that is amazing.
I know. I was like, but you guys, I was just like reading this for the last week and going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Brides commuted into slave girls. No,
yes.
Markets are actually, instruments of state, and coinage is this way to, it's all of these things that are taken out of their human relation space, right?
Yeah.
They're fungible, as the economists like to say. You can trade them without knowing each other. It's between strangers. You don't exchange brides between strangers. You exchange slaves between strangers.
Yes. That makes sense.
So now my whole story has been rearranged and reinforced on basis of what we've been talking about with the mining. Is really, really important because the minerals and where they go. That I knew about the silver that goes to Spain. It doesn't enrich Spain. I didn't know that it ended up in China. That's very interesting, and it makes sense, right? That the balance of trade is such that all of that South American silver goes to China to pay for the stuff that the Europeans want from China, and the gold ends up in India.
In India.
Yeah. And not in Europe. So that Europe has to be in this perpetual pirate mode. And then things like the Bank of England is actually, this is another great, sort of tidbit. The Bank in England is based on the debt of the king, right? So if you get all those coins stamped to the head of the king, that's the king owes this. And that all of our modern economies running on debt, right? This is the idea, just what Fox has talked about all the time, that banks create money because they just make debt. That's true, right? But Graeber is trying to show the way in which this plays out, one, over the whole of human history, and two, in these different cycles of when it's coinage and when it's not. And if we are now in a period when it's not coinage, but it's only not been gold based for about the time that we were going to do our historical experiment, since the 70s. Who knows what we're in now? How can you predict the future off of that?
Well, we don't. Just thinking about this, because we're not in a period where we can even say for certain what we're trading between East and West. Right now, we're in a moment where there's a war over the waterways, just for control over the trade routes themselves.
Right.
So it's sort of like there's a mystery around the currency that we're using for all of that, and also the currents that we're using for the physical shipping of everything. We're in a moment of complete unknowns there. And that's why I don't want to make predictions, because Australia's it's swinging as a pendulum between East and West, and we're precariously positioned between the two. because it's sort of like by accident a Western country, but we're geographically as east as you could possibly be.
Right.
So where we're gonna go is just it's very difficult to know. Although I was happy to see, as Vox commented in his blog, that Australia has decided not to send troops to the Red Sea,
Right.
which is refreshing because that would be a first for us in refusing to send troops for international conflict to back whatever monetary system we're participating in. So it's an interesting time. But it's amazing that there's just so much of the Americas in Asia.
Right, right. I can
In
unpack
terms
that,
of
but I'm
those
going to answer
minerals.
fat first. I didn't say fat. I
Okay.
did say we forgot to charge shipping to our Kickstarter backers. We very explicitly said shipping not included. What we don't know how to do, and this is the payment processing problem. I'm now watching my dog pee in the basement. This is bad too. Leave it alone. No. There's all these furs that he's about to eat. Don't eat that. Oh my gosh, what did you do? Oh my gosh. The basement is full of stuff that was purchased in please don't, kiddo. He ate a
He's
he
buccaneering,
did.
isn't he?
He ate a horse whip the last time we were down here and then threw it up and I was like, what are all those pieces there? Okay, fat, and then we'll get back to Australia and the shipping routes. We didn't forget to charge the backers. We don't know how to do it, which is the payment Kickstarter is a payment processor. Talk about like debt and payment stuff, right? Kickstarter can collect the monies that you all pledged, but in our pledging we said shipping not included because our instructions on how to run a Kickstarter was be sure to say shipping not included because you will need to, once you know how much things weigh, charge people for their shipping. But to do that, we have to figure out how to get your money. And Kickstarter did that for us with the pledges, but Easy Ship apparently we have more hoops to jump through to get credit card payments for the specific amounts of the packages that are all now packaged up. You're gonna love them because they're like beautifully enveloped too, right? The dragon theme is strong. But now that we have the actual packages weighed and measured, we don't know how to get the money out of you guys with your credit cards. You can send us gold and we'll just
Yeah. I was gonna
just
say
send gold and we'll send you a package.
send doubloons. Send us some doubloons.
How much is a dragon book worth to you guys? Right? We and whose head is going to be on the coin?
Yes. Yeah. That'll be an interesting prediction.
Anyway, Australia. So yeah, I've been watching Macrea's contemplations for a while now, and yes, he's a gamer, like all these gaming guys, right? You guys are used to thinking through strategy and how pieces play out. I am fat. Yes, we need to get connected with Chuck Dixon. These guys, JDA, I know him too. They're at a whole new level than we are. They have thousands of people. We didn't get a certain level of things that make all of these things easy. Help us next time get more people. The starting up of starting ups is tremulous, right? Alexander Macrease made $300,000 on his Kickstarter, so come on. And I do know him too. I've done videos with him. Oh, right, that he was talking about things like the Mackinder thesis with the world island and the world ocean, and so we've been watching for years now. I mean, back even when we were doing the spice stuff 2 years ago, when we started writing Great Chimicus, to saying, yes, watch the way the spice flows, whether it's by land or by sea. And so all of these things like that the United States is begging for help, Operation Prosperity Garden, to prevent the Houthi, who I'm not clear who are, but anyway, they're only attacking Israeli-owned ships and the United States is trying to help the Israeli-owned ships get through the Red Sea, and it's not working. And oh my goodness, how everything that was invisible to us, as long as the ships were just moving around and going through the Suez
Yes.
and going through the Panama, is suddenly visible, in that
Yes.
it's not real movement of real objects takes water, and people are reminding themselves that they're in control of those different choke points.
Yeah. The economy seemed to run on autopilot. People don't realize it takes pilots. People are piloting vessels, and they're piloting vessels, sailing these enormous vessels through very interesting geographic areas, hotspots, political hotspots. I mean,
Right.
everybody remembers the Somali pirates not long ago. The Yemeni coast is wild. There is still an active slave trade that is going in through Yemen to Saudi Arabia. Speaking of the economy running on slave girls, a lot of women from Africa are brought over the Red Sea, that little point between Eritrea and Djibouti and Yemen, and they're taken by boat and they're transferred through Yemen and taken up into Saudi Arabia. So yeah.
Right.
It's not like those boats are going through this like wonderful canal where everything is like a kind of modern Western context. It's like, oh, we're just going to go through that little bit that's between London and France, and it's all very nice. We'll have a bit of a cruise. These vessels are going through spaces of the world that are, I mean, to call them underdeveloped would be an understatement. I don't know how you describe it. It's like that's the kind of the Wild East, that Red Sea portion. So
we love you too, Fat.
Oh
you're
yes.
you're absolutely our best fan, and we really want to get these books to you, but we had steps that, like getting through the canals, right? We didn't.
Yeah. Whoops.
Well, no, the thing is, we did know these
Yeah.
were steps, but they're various steps that until you get there, you don't realize what the layers are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So postage.
Postage.
We can analyze the maritime powers, but trying to figure out postage is the new challenge. Yeah.
Well, actually, so Graeber in his bureaucracy book has a really interesting discussion on the German post office, and that in the 19th century, the German post office was the gold standard of efficiency, and everybody wanted to be the German post office. So, yeah, like that we I don't know how we'll bring the post office into Draco Chemicus, but we'd already been thinking about all these other media elements, right? The electrical telegraphs and the shipping and the pirates and the gold digging and stuff. But we're encouraged by our continuing reading that we somehow knew the right things, even though we didn't know the fullness of everything, including how to pay for the rest of the Kickstarter problem. Yeah. So my it's like I'm not sure, these are kind of not predictions, as we're thinking about things to pay attention to in the upcoming year. Right. Continue to pay attention to the money supply, obviously. But in the sense of, I mean, Graeber knew that debt was a big thing, obviously wrote the book about it, and Occupy was obviously to some extent about debt. E. Michael Jones has talked about how it was this, it's the students that were at Occupy not really knowing what they were up against, because debt has created this, it creates a reality. And one of the things that Graeber's saying is like, why is it real? Right? Why is debt real? Why is it that you should pay your debts? Says who? Right? You're like, wait a minute, but shouldn't you? Isn't that the basis of morality, is paying your debts? And he's like, isn't it interesting that that's a moral thing? And that I'm wanting to. He said his family was Jewish, right? So he didn't talk that much about Christianity. He talks about one parable several times of the unforgiving steward, right? Who the Lord forgives for his big debt, but then the steward doesn't forgive the smaller debtors that he has to deal with. So the Lord throws him out into the darkness. I have thought a lot about the theological metaphor of debt in my first book, From Judgment to Passion. I'm talking about the 11th century and the way in which coins were coming into circulation and use and metaphor in the 11th century in Europe. Pache Graeber, who says they're not really coinage, but they're out there as a known mode still in the Middle Ages. And Anselm, in his meditation on the reason for the incarnation, has a lot of language of debt. And I'm of course now curious to revisit it with a new economic foundation to think about. But what I was thinking about with the slave girls and the problem for our Drake, really stop it. My dragon is now eating the basket with the spurs in it. Don't do that. He looks at me. Please stop. Come on, you've already here. You've destroyed something that I don't even know what he's destroyed now. There's bits of wood everywhere. Just stop it. Sit. Go to sleep. That the reason for the incarnation being a body, that God takes on flesh, and there's got to be something about the king has to become a slave in order to redeem the slaves. Something in there is part of all of this. How this gets us out of our present debt, I'm not quite clear.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one. I don't know. I'm I'm nervous to make predictions. And I know that in terms of debt, I mean, it's an interesting thing with Australia too, because we're getting shuffled around. We had a setup which was proposed as a Commonwealth system, which meant that a lot of the assets of the country in Australia were technically national assets for a very long time. Unlike in America, where you had a lot of private enterprises, in Australia, most of the things here were national assets run by national companies. And a lot of that stuff was sold off. So it's kind of like, as you're talking about this too, it's like the individuals that are in debt need to be ransomed from their debt. But it's sort of like what's kind of happened is that everyone's still thinking about their country as though it's a country. What's a country? It's kind of this like collection of people. It hasn't functioned like that in Australia for a while. We kind of removed a lot of that idea of a nation with its assets. Everything gets sold off to whoever wants to buy it up, and it feels like at the moment everyone's been shifted into a kind of tenancy situation, or they're kind of leasing their presence in the country. I don't know if this is making sense, but some
of it's my fault for garbling up the layers and layers and layers of stuff I learned from Graeber. But one of the things he points to is saying, so slavery is a reduction of human beings to the work that their bodies can do. It's erasing all of their social relations, and he does make the interesting point that in the grand day of the Atlantic slave trade, most of the slaves actually went to Brazil, not the United States. So just tidbit. There was kind of an assumption that you wouldn't end up in slavery if you weren't somehow guilty, in the sense of in debt, right? Because the primary, people could end up in slavery constantly because they start off in debt, can't pay the debt, and then they are, all they have left is their body, which has been placed as the collateral. First, they're family members, which is how you end up with slave girls. But wage labor is in fact like temporary slavery. It's, I will sell my labor for a certain amount of time every day to be used by my employer for whatever the employer wants. Like, this is my job, I have to do this job because that's what I'm being paid for. It's a kind of subset of slavery. It's just, slavery is all of you for your whole life. Or I mean, although not all, ancient slaves could actually earn their freedom. They could buy themselves free. But
Mm.
wage labor actually, I need to read more about how he develops this idea. Um, is a subset of being sold. So the Civil
Mm.
War didn't end slavery; it just
Change the structure of the
changed
slave
the
system.
structure of it. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, and therefore that's why it's like the indentured servants. Indentured is slave for a certain amount of time. The students that
Yes.
have the debts that they have allegedly to the government and to the banks are
Mm-hmm.
basically indentured.
Yes.
They're
Aren't they these are the only debts that cannot be foreclosed on, or you can't declare bankruptcy on student debt, correct?
legally in the United States, correct. They're
Yeah.
slaves.
Yeah. We have the same situation here.
Yeah.
And again, going uh, to what I was saying before, is that the Commonwealth system in Australia meant that we got free education. It sounds like socialism to everybody over in America. I know it's going to make people kind of prickly because it's it's free education, right? But everything was free. You could do as many degrees as you want to, as long as you had the academic merit to stay in the courses. So the universities were self-governed and the faculty ran everything, but people didn't pay a cent for their education until the 90s here, and then we transitioned to the American style system where people took on the debt for their higher education. So you had a lot more people being offered the opportunity to go into a university, but the caveat is that they take the debt on for going to university.
Right.
Now we can't clear those debts either. So
Well,
there's
some
no
of the
way
way
you can
that
just say I'm bankrupt. It's an unpayable thing.
right, so they're basically slaves to the state. That
Yes. Yeah.
some of Graeber's stuff that I need to work through is about this concept of liberty, how it is in fact also predicated on slavery. That freedom is
Okay.
yeah. The thing is I've just finished the book, and so I'm not entirely sure that I'm totally persuaded by all of it. I'm in that phase where, oh my gosh, you
Yes.
got to read this, it's
Mm.
everything. Right.
Yeah.
And then you
Yes.
sort of think
Yes.
through which bits are testable and which bits help you revise things. But
Mm.
the I am persuaded by the slavery and its relationship to wage labor, because it's capitalism and communism, always two sides of the same beast.
Yes.
Slavery and wage labor, there's still the sense that the human being is primarily its body's work, or its
Mm.
yeah.
The
So I
pound
mean,
of
but
flesh.
in terms of predictions, it's like everyone's worried about AI and the effect that's going to have on our labor, right? Whether we can be paid to make art or anything else.
Yes.
um that sense of what do you where does the support for human life come from? And
Mm.
that we've conceptualized it all in terms of debt and wages and these particular economic relations. I am wondering about it. It's like, who pays us to write Draco Chemicus? Well, for the most part, we just do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Graeber would say, there's a sort of primitive not primitive, but there's a communism of sociability that a lot more of our economic labor, it's like families or our writing group or the aristocracy always lending each other stuff, or I
Mm-hmm.
was thinking in academia, a lot of our work, we're paid by the universities, but we share each other's work for free in a lot of different ways. So the sort of what the state doesn't get its grip on in terms of taxable stuff. I'm a very beginning economic discussant, so these are concepts that are new to me, and they're sticking in my understanding. But I know he's right about debt. It's a weird thing, right?
Mm.
This weird mystical reality that we think is real in a sort of
Mm.
forceful way, that he wanted to understand why we think it's real.
Mm. I'm thinking in terms of how people cooperate with each other beyond that mystical exchange of being a creditor or a debtor.
Right.
Because of all the natural disasters that have happened here, we think about this a lot because people have lost everything. So suddenly, those artificial relationships between I'm a creditor, I'm a debtor, they get eliminated when it comes to the the fact of a cyclone smashing through an entire state. People are
Right.
suddenly homeless and whatever. You do enter some kind of primitive communism in that environment because you have to. So I suppose it's that the more in your body, like in this kind of thinking, the more in your body you are, um, uh, the more you are in human relationships and not this debtor creditor dynamic. And all of these natural disasters seem to bring everybody into their body and and rely on these human relationships instead of the contract relationships or the contract agreements that they have, because the contracts are kind of an illusion. I mean, everyone says they have insurance. It's sort of irrelevant if you have insurance or not when a cyclone goes through an entire town. I mean, that's an entire town that's been destroyed. Uh, you know, the the effort to rebuild is not just a problem of putting money on it. It has to be about mending the relationships of that environment that's been completely destroyed. So it's kind of something similar to the monetary system. Everyone assuming or expecting it to collapse soon. It's sort of like, okay, well, that we're waiting for a financial cyclone to hit. Once the cyclone hits, what happens then? Oh, it's going to be complete chaos. But I don't know. Will
It
it
may
be,
not
or will it?
be. Right.
It might just be an opportunity for everybody to ignore debt and creditor relationships and start relying on each other again. I don't know.
Right. And so Casey is saying when you owe the bank 1 million, you're in trouble. When you owe it 1 billion, the bank's in trouble. Well,
Yeah.
when you owe it 1 billion, you're the king, right? And I think this is what Graeber was. He was. I mean, what's interesting. He was certainly not on the. I don't know whose side he's on in our system of. I mean, he would point out that these sides are artificial and based on myths of their own. He was big on what he called the global justice movement, which is how things came out of the Occupy things. But what he was trying to do was like think about the Adam Smith system, which it begins on the myth of barter, and therefore you want this sort of completely impersonal market relationship. He says that's a total like fantasy version of everything. It's not even like a ideal model. It's simply a thought experiment that sounds plausible. And it sounded so plausible that we've invented all these sorts of economic theories off of it, but it doesn't. I mean, it's like what Vox said about the free trade argument. It doesn't work on all sorts of levels. And you could say most human activity is not in fact captured by the debt credit system. It certainly you can end up in this situation where the illusion of it has destroyed lives. And I mean,
Yes.
one of the other things that we've also been thinking about is the way the drug trade has been used to destroy communities. That Britain, in its being pirates and gold diggers, was also drug dealers and used the opium to completely destroy China in the 19th century. That same thing clearly is happening right now with the oxy and the meth and the whatever else.
Fentanyl.
Yeah, fentanyl, whatever else is coming into the United States. So it's China's revenge.
Yeah.
That you can demoralize a population so that it just quits.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the things we're trying to figure out is how to restore people's hope. But some of it is, for Graeber would be getting out of this illusion that um, the the market is the only arbiter of economic health.
Mm. Yeah. Well, it's not. I mean, it's not if if it's only measuring the amount of debt that's being created, then it's not a measure of the economic health. Because you can have a booming financial sector because more and more debt's being created. Meanwhile, the actual economy, or the foundation of the economy, which is human beings that are in it, could be completely imploding. Which is I suppose that's the tension that we're going to be working with in the next act. And the problem too is it's the the drug trade, the drug imports that we're dealing with now. It eventually is going to undermine even the debt system, because you need people that are alive to work to pay off their debts. If you've got people which are overdosing on these chemicals like oxy and fentanyl and everything, then you don't have people that are capable of creating and paying debt. It's an interesting problem to think about, how these kinds of systems are managed, you know.
Well, the debt's not actually payable. I mean, the students cannot pay those debts off.
No,
they've been set up that they're in fact. And so FAT is saying, aha, the usury system is the opposite of the family system. Yes, and debt relationships usurp the proper tribal providing relationships. Exactly. And what Kilch just said about the opposite of the debt economy, Graeber tried to come up with some other way to describe it. He says the human economy. It's like they're human economies, and then there are these artificial financial economies, and the financial economy is itself this kind of, I mean, we've certainly been thinking about this as a parasite. It's a parasite on the actual human relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is what the referendum in Australia was about, which I didn't talk very, very much about on the stream when it was happening, in passing. But a big part of the problem, and someone's asked me this on a comment a little while ago. They said, comment on what's going on there in Australia with the government sort of invoking Aboriginalism as its state mythology now, because everyone went woke and they wanted to just pump all of the bureaucratic rituals with some kind of obeisance to something kind of Aboriginal. And everyone arguing in Australia this year about whether to officially incorporate Aboriginal Australia as this kind of united entity, with its own special status in the Constitution. So everyone was yelling about it and screaming about how unjust it was and how it was going to make everybody unequal, yada, yada, yada. But from the position of a lot of families here in Australia and a lot of people that have been discussing it, a lot of Aboriginal activists in Australia, the problem is that you've got two incompatible systems, which is what we've just been discussing, the parasitic, which sits on top of the human. And in terms of the Aboriginal relationships, and the reason why everybody's so angry about what happened under colonialism here is because the population was subjected to a parasitic kind of a parasitic economy on top of the human economy. And the Aboriginal is all about tribal and kinship relationships, whereas the parasitic and the debt mechanism, the parasitic economy, it destroys the tribal, and also actively, in Australia at least, actively tried to divide tribe by colour, by who was looking more British and who was looking more Aboriginal, which of course completely destroys a family. If you colour one family and you say uncle is very dark, so he's going to be categorized as an Aboriginal. However, this grandchild is very, very pale and has blonde hair and blue eyes and can pass and can go into white Australia. You've effectively destroyed any possibility for a tribal economy. So this is what the argument here in Australia is about colonialism. It's not hate whitey. I think it's just that a lot of people can't actually vocalize what's happened in a way, or if they are, they're not the people that are getting a lot of attention because they're also highlighting this parasitic economic system that sits on top of the tribal.
Right.
And it's very hard for everybody to adapt. what the offer was this year was an invitation for everybody to come in and say, oh, okay, well, we're going to stay Aboriginal, we're going to be Aboriginal, but we want to have a special status under the Constitution, be incorporated, and then get all of these privileges under this parasitic economic system. And a lot of people here knew it was an incompatible thing,
Right.
and it failed because of this. But what's happened here has been the destruction of the human relationships, and that's very hard to rebuild. And I don't think the bureaucracy can't rebuild it. Bureaucracies can't rebuild the destruction of human relationships.
Well, they
So,
don't want to. They're premised on destroying them.
Yeah.
I mean, AI, we're worried about AI destroying art, right? Bureaucracies are like artificial intelligence, they're artificial humanity.
Yeah.
And they're staffed on the premise of, meritocracy and testing, which in the education system in the United States, that was supposed to be the point, right? You go into this debt because you can become then part of the bureaucracy, become part of this meritocratic testable, widget interchangeability. This is again, Graeber, because he's an anthropologist, has more practice talking about these sort of tribal family relation systems than modern. I mean, historians, we should be better at this, but that your father is not an interchangeable man with all other men or individuals, right? Your brother, your sister, your cousin, these are all, networked. I mean, it's like the net of all of these relations is what makes you. And both in the slavery, the bureaucracy, the wage labor, you're radically an individual, as we like to say, because none of those relationships matter. It's corruption to worry about those relationships.
Isn't that interesting?
Whose corruption, right? It's corrupting to hire my son, for this activity. Well, then you're saying, your human relations don't hold in this particular system, which then, talk about dragon-like, right? It's like our Draco, our alchemical dragon is this alchemical transformation of human beings into workers,
human resources,
yes, exactly, mining human beings so that they become nothing but coin. And what's interesting is all of these metaphors are active throughout the Middle Ages. I mean, they're perfectly well aware of this problem of what does it mean not to be. I mean, I suppose one of the things I'd be interesting is like thinking about made things and art and manufacture and craftsmanship, and that Mary is meant to, this she's the most beautiful creature of God. So both natural and artificial, both, mountains and trees and rivers, but also temple and tabernacle and ark, that in thinking of what kind of economy exists in a world in which that God is your maker, and every individual is infinitely precious because made by God. It's like, is the industrial world a parasitic aberration on this, or I mean, I don't want to go where Christianity went off the rails. So I think I don't like that idea. We might have to test it, right? Because we've talked about this, and it's like the Christian valorization of making. Is it like the dragon has seduced us into believing that all making can be mechanized? I think mechanized making has got to be the fallen version of things, because you want to control everything. We're gibbering a bit tonight because we're trying to be predictive, and we're also predicting for you all what we're going to be doing over the next year, which is trying to figure this part of the story out.
Yeah, well, the mechanization of it, this is the problem. This is the problem now, because COVID, which has just happened and no one's talking about. COVID was an interesting factory setting adjustment. The factory settings for the culture. I talked about this week, but it really was like a factory settings reset. And the entire excuse, of course, was the health, the
Bodies,
healthcare.
bodies that all had to be
Bodies,
marked,
of course,
registered,
bodies.
marked, filed.
Yep, yep.
Yep.
Categorized as, essential, non-essential, vaccinated, unvaccinated. All of these the IKEAification of everyone. It's like, because we kind of make this flat pack existence, and everything is orderly. This is a thing that is lingering. So I suppose when people are making predictions, they look at the strategic um, ambitions of a lot of the players and the powers in the world. But people have a strategy that they're laying over the psyche and the human relationships that are created. All the dynamics that have happened because of all of these strategies. Like what's going on with COVID now has it's still here. It's still in effect. That I think people are getting over the the experience of being in factory reset for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is kind of I know I'm kind of rambling, but it's had a profound effect on people in Australia. It has in my family. It has in a lot of families that I know, friends of mine, acquaintances of mine, that something has happened that has permanently shifted the human economy here in this country after what happens. So whatever is happening above that in terms of the parasitic, that has its own strategic objectives. But the human underneath it, I think, is more important. And it's probably something that I would like us to focus on in the next year, especially because everybody gets obsessed with strategy because I think we're looking too much at what can be mechanized. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the the ones who want to make everything mechanical, they'll overstep, or they're doing things that even they themselves can't control, because underneath it is human, and the human, you can't predict what happens with human beings ultimately. I know that the last couple of years we've had everyone sort of getting out of the pandemic and not worrying about it anymore, but I have a feeling that next year there is going to be some after effect of it that is going to come out that we weren't necessarily expecting, at least here.
Well, so you're thinking of predictions in different ways from I am. It's like one, can we predict what the big whales are going to do,
Yes.
swamping us little minnows swimming around, to use this wax image.
Mm.
Um, can we do we have some sense of how the evil schemes are gonna play out? I mean, I think the evil schemers tend to tell us what they want to do, and
Yeah. Yep.
and they always, the dragon is very predictable. He just wants control over people and wills, obviously.
Yes.
Dark Herald was just putting on the Archaven blog a thing that Amazon is trying again with its rings of power, and Sauron is,
Yeah.
what were they
Are we
thinking?
in for another season?
We're in for another season.
I'm probably the only one that watched the whole of the first season. I'll be watching the
You live
second
to
one.
tell the tale. I mean,
Yeah.
okay. So credibility. When we did the Galadriel one, she went and did the rest of her research, and I actually watched the rest of it. So I think, predicting what the giant evil scheme, they're going to try what they always try. I mean, they're going to try
Yes.
the kind of control of the financial system. They're going to try to control those canals. They're going
Yes.
to try their propaganda to get the young men, to choose sides and kill each other.
Yes.
But we've seen this enough. This is the history repeats itself part of the show.
Yes.
But I'm also thinking about, it's like, how are people going to behave in the situations that this scheming has created? And that's, of course, the Hobbit level that
Yes.
you're wanting to say. I don't want to predict yet. I feel moderately confident in my ability to predict how people are going to behave around COVID, because I I wrote it up in 2020 and it all came true.
Yeah.
And one of the predictions that I made in the sense of how people were going to be affected by the whole psyop, was in my blog post on COVID, the one COVID to rule them all, that we were just going to forget stuff.
Yeah.
Right. I was already writing in May 2020 about how the lockdown effect was to make you forget all of your routines. I couldn't even do our credits today, right? It's like, you're going to forget all of your relationships. I'm watching that play out now. People are, they seem to have forgotten things that happened a few years ago. They seem not to understand why behavior has changed. Like, why is so and so acting that way now? And I'm like, don't you remember what went on? It's like the amnesia that comes from trauma is playing out very clearly.
Yes.
I mean, and that's been unsettling for me because, you and I, we've been practicing remembering, so that it's like we keep reactivating trauma that everybody else has clearly moved on from. So that they're sitting around going, why is so and so still wearing a mask? What could that possibly mean? And you're like, weren't you there when they were making the children wear them in school? Of course the kids are still affected by this. How can you pretend that didn't stick? I mean, that's been frustrating for me, because you're just like, talk about, history. People, those who did not remember, are doomed to repeat it. Well, try remembering right now what happened 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's the scheming level and strategy, and what the big people that think they're in control or like to be in control think they can pull off. There's the way people react in kinds of situations that we can study as a sort of psychological effect. And then there's the, gee, where do you think God is going to take the story next?
Yeah. That's the best.
which E. Michael Jones likes talking about is the cunning of reason, right? It's like all these schemers think that X is going to happen, and in fact, not the way they wanted it. That they weren't able to control people's wills to the degree that they thought they could. Yes. So I think usually when people are doom spiraling, they don't credit people's sheer cussedness and refusing to behave in the way that the powers would like them to.
Yeah, I think we're in for some surprises next year. Some pleasant surprises. I'm hoping, but I know we're in for a lot of surprises next year on this front, because that amnesia can only last for so long, considering what happened.
Right.
It's only going to last for so long. It's like when you have a car accident, you go into shock. Then afterwards, you're out of it. I think that's kind of what's going on.
The people are in the shock at the moment.
Yeah. I think they've been in the shock. They've been in that shock phase, and once that wears off, they're something will change. People are not going to be able to sustain the denial about 2 years of mass torture for the rest of their lives. It's just not going to happen. So it's going to be an interesting thing to watch how that shock wears off when people eventually thaw out, and then have a recall of what happened.
Well, I think you're being a little optimistic about how long these things can last, because the other book I'm reading now is about Germany.
Hey, Germania.
Which is again, it's another one that came out in 2010, right? So I'm sort of reading back in time, as it were, to what people thought about, and the premise of it. He's English, Simon Winder, and is talking about how his father for some reason took them on a trip a river trip to the Alsace in when he was 14, and it changed his life forever. He's in his 40s when he wrote this book, because he must be my age, so in his mid 50s now. Okay. And he's very interested in Germany, but the whole book is haunted by, obviously, the Nazis. I mean, he's talking about in 2010 about how Germany still, is affected by the trauma of what the country went through in the early 20th century. And I have lots of reasons for wanting to read more about Germany. One that I need to. I'm going to get to teach some more, I think, in medieval German history in the next few years. So this is a pleasure and a challenge for me. But on the other hand, what I'm reading I just started reading this today, so I'm only at the medieval part, and I am now learning that my sense that, wait a minute, exactly what happened in German medieval history that in my imagination is vague. I mean, I can do it, right? I can tell you about the investor controversy and stuff like that, but it's vague, partly because it's vague. That the Germans in the 19th century are desperately trying to create their fairy tale version of what happened. They're rebuilding a lot of stuff after Napoleon and other, that a good deal of German medieval history is imaginary. And, that imagining of German medieval history is then what got used in the Nazi period. He was just now in the bit I was reading talking about how they took over the monastery, the convent at Quedlinburg, which I know from the nuns living there in the 12th century, such, and was used as a kind of Nazi shrine for who they thought was Heinrich the Fowler, the founder of the German Empire and stuff. It's like, okay, talk about amnesia, right? A whole country can completely forget a history that never in fact happened. I mean, it's like we're in for some
great.
We're in for some wild rides through all of this. And your book, the Ferguson that you just picked up, I think another thing that's obviously happening and is going to continue to happen is this, never mind the 1619 project showing that the United States is founded on slavery, the whole sort of structure of people's storytelling about who we are is about to go through a massive restructuring.
Yeah.
I mean, including like mining and the debt and the how did we end up in this situation? Well, the United States used its markets founded on armies to control its monetary supply for the last 80 years. Connect the dots. And is it I put it in my Telegram today, all sorts of countries are not using the dollar anymore.
Yeah.
Which is going to eventuate in a massive, it's like we need to rethink why we have the story that we do about the American Empire, about the currency, about the free market.
Yeah.
I've got this drink here that I have from Texas. It's called Shiner Bock, German.
Oh.
Small town, small brewery. Every drop of Shiner Bock beer is brewed in Shiner, Texas. Population 2,069. By local craftsmen who take pride in our little brewery. And our classic Shiner Bock, this American-style Bock, has a clean flavor and a slightly sweet finish. We hope you enjoyed drinking it as much as we enjoyed making it. Prost. There's a lot of Germans in the United States that forgot who they were.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and I also have my fizzy water from the region. This is Topo Chico. Mineral water from Monterrey, Mexico.
Amazing.
Right.
I like getting mineral waters from all over the place.
Mexico.
It's like
Germany.
Yeah.
So the funniest thing I learned recently is how many Germans there are in Mexico. Because in the 19th century,
Why?
the United States tells this story about all these, like my family's, both sides came here from Germany in the mid 19th century and, settled in various parts of the Midwest and stuff. A lot of Germans went to Mexico.
Amazing.
It's like, come on, guys, let's study lots and lots of history. Study absolutely every little pocket of movement and peoples. I mean, one of the things this guy in Germania said is like, what's Germany? Tacitus writes this book that says Germania. It's like the outside of the Roman Empire and such. And it's like, yeah, which moment were you trying to describe? Because mainly what the history of Germany is peoples moving through it and conquering each other. And, you know, so that you end up with the Holy Roman Empire that's like a giant mosaic of little bitty places, and it's never unified until the 19th century. There is no Germany.
Duchy fights.
Duchy fights.
Duchy fights.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like literally Germany as a country has only existed since, who knows, 1945. And then there was West and East, right? It's the as the American Empire finds itself redefined, all of these other definitions are going to be being called into relation again, right? It's like the nations exist in conversation with each other just as people exist in conversation with their families. How's that? That's a good one.
No, that makes sense. So this is again, it's the human relationships shifting and changing. Right. And okay, so they're the ones that are ultimately creating the mythologies. But it's going to butt against that the parasitic. So we're all caught between the two. Because
it's so much fun explaining stuff to you, and you get it exactly. You guys, I just want you to mark this, how good she is at translating my gibberish into insight.
That makes sense.
It does to her. And
that's Australia.
Okay, so back off. So we have Silent Draco saying cowboys from Germany, Bohemia, Czech lands. Yes, the cowboys came here, and Casey saying the Germans went to Texaco, Texas, when it was part of Mexico. Yes, that's why I have these two drinks, Topo Chico and Shiner Bock. Right? And as far as everybody's here concerned, they're totally local. Neither of them are English.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Yeah. No, this makes sense. It's a self-perception problem now. Everyone's going through it. And then the empire's perception of itself.
Right. And we've talked a lot about that in the last year, right? It's like the Anglo Empire is suddenly having to confront itself. I mean, it's been sort of not completely, and we did Charles's coronation, right, which was an interesting mythological moment.
Yes.
That, you know, the British Empire had to confront itself to a certain extent all along. I mean, it didn't, bringing it into the slave trade, but then creating the Industrial Revolution. Did we just play bait and switch? We're not sure. That, you know, the trauma of the historical study and people finding out which pieces of which stories they're part of. This to me is why our, you know, American politics being trying to, you know, shove it into the boxes of, you know, GOP versus donkey, you know, the elephant versus the donkey.
Oh yeah.
You know, nobody's watching because the boxes are they've lost their mythological power at the moment, but they're also clearly speaking to no one. I mean, Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy, I got to meet him briefly when he was here for our little KOVA conference in Chicago. You know, they're speaking a myth that is being rapidly dismantled mugged by reality.
It's an obsolete myth. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, our myth worked best when we had the Nazis to blame for it.
You need some new Nazis.
That's what empires do. They create their enemy, and you hate your enemy. You have to hate that enemy. Make sure you hate that enemy, because otherwise, who are you? We're the ones who hate them.
Yeah. Well, this is what's happening now in the Red Sea. It's like the relationships of friend and foe are all being renegotiated around that canal.
Yes.
Yeah. And the alliances that people were banking on,
Literally.
yeah, literally, are changing very quickly. Again, they're not really they're not based in human relationships. They're based in transactional kind of debt mechanisms also. So this is going to be challenging, especially to people that think in terms of nation states, because I mean, as we've had to on the Ark too, it's a kind of revisioning what it means to say nation. And you've said many times, it's essentially the ability to assemble a military.
Well, it's a
Also,
state.
like
The state's ability.
yeah, a
Well,
state.
a king can assemble an army too.
Mm.
The thing about kings is they do risk their own bodies in the battle, as opposed to bureaucracies, which they don't risk their own bodies in the battle.
Yes, yes. Then there's also the navy question. You have to be able to assemble a military, risk your body, but also you have to be able to assemble people that are capable of becoming a navy in order to protect all of these trade relationships.
Well, that's the pirate level. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back you were saying that commercial relations. So the ideal Adam Smith commercial relation gets rid of the problem of trust. And so, but ironically, that Adam Smith he's like Janus faced and things. He wants the market to be completely impersonal, but then he also, his only other book is The Theory of Moral Sentiments, where he just assumes that people want to be liked. And no, this is Adam Smith's entire theory of morality is people want to be considered lovely, right? That they want to be liked, and they'll behave well because they don't want to be hated. And you're just like, gee. Great.
Where did he grow up?
Scotland. And he just wanted to be liked, and he figured that was his theory of. I mean, he's like, talk about, don't trust your feelings, right?
Yeah.
Adam Smith's entire moral theory is based on your feelings, sentiments, right? Behave well because you don't want people to think you're nasty. And then his market theory is equally silly, right? Because then you realize he is also apparently drawing on Persian theorizing, so it may be Islamic, but that it's the market will be this impersonal exchange system which doesn't depend on people being liked by each other. But the thing is, but the contracts that don't depend on that ultimately depend on a gun, right? They depend on me being able to show up with my gun and say, you must honor this contract. Otherwise, what's a contract? It's a bit of paper. And so the whole sort of the magic of being able to say there's such a thing as the currency and the contracts and all of that, it's only real insofar as it's backed by the guns. And the United States is rapidly learning that it can only bully so many people into accepting its contracts. Good night, Silent Draco. He says he's
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. He's running out of energy. Yes, we are losing people. We've clearly taxed their stamina over the last year, so that they can't. Aren't you going to stick around for the midnight, revelation of what it is that's going to happen? So I think we need to. I mean, I'm paying more attention to Germany because I want to understand better what happened with the story of who Germany is. And Winder is interesting because he's writing as an Englishman, saying England and Germany have this interesting relationship of they're like each other but not, and I think that's fair. It is interesting for the United States that Germans are here. Most of our population is in fact the white population is highly German, but nobody knows it
Hmm.
because
They
Wilson,
lost their,
they lost it
yeah,
thanks to
yeah.
they abandoned it thanks to the propaganda in the 20th century. And how people are going to start reconstituting themselves as human beings.
Hmm.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm interested in. What kinds of human relationships are people going to build with after the great state effort to enroll everybody and turn us into bodies?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've been paying attention to that sort of happening down here and listening to what people are saying. A lot of reluctance to go back into the workforce or into particular professions. Uh, the that bureaucratic effort to enroll everybody into mechanistic existence backfired a lot in that sense, because a lot of the bureaucracy in Australia now is in a crisis of staffing. They can't find the human resources that are willing to go in and be mechanized.
Now that's hopeful. That's right.
It
They
is
won't
hopeful.
go
Yeah,
work for the
yeah.
bureaucracy. How
They don't
delightful is
want to
that?
work for the bureaucracy, yeah. So my optimism may be foolish, but in some sense, it's based in promising events, because people were burned by it,
Mm,
and now they won't give their bodies over to the bureaucracy. The police forces are having staffing shortages, like critical staffing shortages. Uh, the education system, all sorts of different government departments are having difficulty finding people, because nobody wants to be submitting themselves to those kind of regulations ever again. Even people that complied perfectly have decided to leave. They
wow.
took out their existing pension funds, and they've gone. They've left the workforce. It's very, very interesting. Yeah, yeah.
That is
So
great.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
very interesting. Yeah. So it's the quiet little
yeah.
home schools, right? Take people out of the
Yes,
government
very
schools
quiet.
and
Yeah,
um
yeah.
yeah.
There's no loud revolution happening. It's just quiet withdrawal from bureaucracy that's occurring every day. Yeah. People moving into different areas so that they can experience a village life.
Hmm.
A lot of homeschool is happening. Yeah, a lot of homeschooling is, and yeah, it's lovely. The the that's kind of, to me, the signal. There's a shift. Something's happened. People are, at least if they're not talking about it openly, they're feeling the effect of what happened
Right.
during those years. So the next step then is what happens when that becomes the norm. You know, everybody starts to look left and right, and sees everybody leaving. That that becomes a trend. Then what happens when people are needing to renegotiate their living, making a living with each other without
Hmm.
relying on this? Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time.
So things that can happen, and this is, watching the French Revolution. One of the things that happens in these upheavals, and that the state
Mm.
always is worried about, is the peasants sack the houses of lords and burn all their documents, which is what happened in
Ah,
the French Revolution. That over the course of the summer in 1789, there's reports coming into Paris from all of the land, and that one of the major things that happens, they're not just like riots and pitchforks and things like that. They go into the seigneurs' archives and burn their documents.
mm,
The peasants understand the importance of the bureaucracy to hold those debts, right? And then they just can't,
yes.
they get rid of them. So uh, the degree to which any of us is able to resist being absorbed into that bureaucracy, that's a major question. And that's what's, of course, frightening people with the things like the surveillance. And you're
Yes.
going to be under, you're not going to be able to eat if you don't have the right digits. obviously, right, the dragon level desire to control. But as you were talking, it's saying people simply withdraw from this. The dragon loves
Mm,
history. This, I hadn't thought of this before, but the grand narrative claims are big imperial state structures. What happens after the Roman Empire falls is you can't tell the story because it's all too local. And that being what
yeah.
Germania is like, right? It's like they're constantly trying to reinvent the Roman Empire, and they call themselves the Holy Roman Empire, and it never really works, right? Hitler didn't succeed, right? Because by that time the British and the Americans are good at preventing it. But that one of the things that makes it difficult to tell early medieval history when, the empire breaks apart is it's all too
Mhm,
fragmented. There's no
mhm.
grand story. The United States wants to be the grand story that, includes, certain kinds of movements and presidents and this and that. And it's like if you actually tell
Yes.
all of our little local stories of all of these um developments across the continent, one, it's impossible to narrate, and two, it's I guess it's exactly the kind of story that the dragon can't contain because it's
Mm,
all the human real, it's the anthropological level of stories
mm,
rather than the military, economic, political story
mm.
of empire. Empire
I
doesn't
had
like
to.
that. They like it likes, clear monuments and capitals and stuff.
Mm. Well, this is interesting. So now we've got another problem because of the statues being ripped down or
Mm.
melted and then spitefully recast into different shapes.
If
Um,
only they were actually beautiful shapes. Unfortunately, it's the craftsmanship is not necessarily available right now.
yeah. But it's sort of like, well, if this is happening in local isolated pockets, then it's people are dismantling
Hmm.
the imposition of that dragon level mythology on them so
Right.
that they can reclaim their own little area. And this is probably the confusion when you hear leftists saying we need to decolonize, and of course people get very upset by it on the right because they're angry at the kind
Right.
of uh, the inference that everything that they've been living in is evil and needs to be completely destroyed. But that's really people unplugging themselves from a bureaucratic mythological layer. They're saying no, we don't want these statues here because this neighborhood belongs to us.
Right.
Well, this space is now we're going to localize it, and so this thing that that sits in the middle of the park represents something completely different to two different groups of people. At the local level, it's representing that imperial imposition that's just sitting there, reminding everybody that they're plugged into a bureaucracy. The other side are seeing it as the reminder of a grand history of a beautiful civilization that they wanted to preserve. So it's an interpretation problem on both sides because whereas everyone is putting it on the left and right, the donkey versus the elephant, but that's not what it really is. It's not left or right. Uh, it's a similar thing to people withdrawing from their role as bureaucratic workers. Does that make sense?
Well, so specific things like the Columbus statue and the Robert E. Lee statue, those were actually put up by the communities at the time. So
Okay.
some of it is the population has changed. I mean, going back to where we started, right? Notice what I
Yes, the
noticed with
mole.
the mall, right? And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
different population. Um, it was interesting to see how some of the shops are no longer the chains, that they're clearly local businesses that are trying to be in the malls.
Mhm.
So, people are, the degree to which the people want to disconnect from the great multinational imperial chain stores and
Mm,
be their own economies. And that I think is, I in the social class that I am, I clearly participate more in the high street mall economy than some of our local economies. But I think, you know, in Chicago, there's there are whole neighborhoods that are themselves completely self-contained as
Yep.
shops and, you know, the churches and the people who live there and things like that. And they're not plugged into the big Anglo it's not even suburban anymore, right? But you know, the whatever the WASP culture, and it's not even really the WASP culture anymore.
Yeah. Post wasp.
Post
What is it?
I'm not sure. Oh, I suppose it was the neoliberal, highly educated university population,
Yeah. Yeah.
which, you know,
So
is,
an
is
indented
rapidly rendering itself ridiculous.
well,
So many
it is,
ways.
but it's interesting too because that's an indentured servant class as well. If you look at it in terms of
Right.
student loans,
Right.
or they've needed to buy their way into that class position in the first place.
Right.
Mm.
Yes, and those are the people, unfortunately, who can't have children now because they're, you know, too dispirited and tell themselves they're too horribly in debt to have children. So it's like the generation wiped out by that whole, you know, promise of the empire to come and be in this you know, this training school, and you will become part of the great bureaucracy,
Mm.
the international jet set liberal bureaucracy. That was a promise. And in the United States, of course, you know, from the 70s and 80s, it turned into that financial sector that was able to, on the basis of debt, become apparently very, very wealthy.
Mm.
That's only backed by the military. And those people don't want to talk about. You're talking
Nobody
about the
wants to go into the military.
Nobody wants to. You can't even. I mean, what Lindsey Graham is doing, the promising exactly what the Roman Empire is. Like, oh, we'll bring all. We can't get our local people to do it anymore. We'll bring in people from over the river, literally.
Yep. How did that work out?
That worked so well for Alaric the Goth.
The Gothic siege.
Hey, they sacked Rome because they hadn't been paid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Washington better pay attention, right? If they recruit enough military with promises and then don't pay them.
Yep.
There is precedent for this.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So the homage in the military is replaced by a completely transactional relationship. So that's an interesting thing. The human has been taken out of the military completely. Now that's a very kind of that's a dark offer to go into that profession now. If the human's been removed completely.
No honor. They want it as a commercial transaction without
Yeah.
I mean, and the military, you know, the United States military had been honor. It's been the South.
Mm-hmm.
Scots-Irish honor.
Yep.
And those guys are all saying, no, this is not honorable. You know, the Uranus Fudge Factory that I started with, that's right by one of our army bases.
And
so, it is, you know, the Fudge Factory is placed in this, like, the whole claim of the shop attraction, right, is its old style Americana. And it's you know, in the middle of Missouri, which is in the middle of that, you know, population, German and Scots-Irish, who, you know, had served in, you know, in honor for now the empire, right? I hear we're having trouble recruiting from that population now.
Yeah. So their emotional state has influenced, their feelings are influencing the economy.
Well, Smith tried to pretend that it didn't have to be that way, but, you know, sorry.
Yeah. So they can't recruit from an honorable demographic, and now all that remains is coin. Yep. That is a very interesting position to be in, because you're treated of the planet with people that have no human, no honor, but in the sense of there's no human relationship within the entire tradition of the empire that they're out to represent on the waterways.
Operation
Nothing
Prosperity
attaching them
Guardian.
mythologically.
Isn't it
Yeah,
Operation
yeah,
Prosperity Guardian?
yeah.
Is that the craziest?
It's so obvious. They're not even trying to hide it. There's no Operation Freedom Guardian, Liberty Guardian, nothing. It's Prosperity Guardian. Yeah. And it's interesting that the Australians are not participating in this.
Yep.
In the way that we would have in any other moment in the history of the United States Empire, because we've been in every conflict that we've been asked to join,
Right.
and yet we're not sending bodies for this one. So it's interesting. Mm.
My guess is they may have thought cleverly, the bureaucrats, that they could get the prosperity gospel people, since I think that particular preaching is associated with it's the evangelical Schofield Israel.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So there may
If
actually
God loves you, you'll be a billionaire.
buried in there some kind of mythological effort, but the rest of the world's going,
Sure.
that's a little on the nose. Yeah, the
Good
Roman
luck.
Empire, the Romans like, we need to preserve our way of life, and it's like, you just sold it to Germania anyway.
Yep. Yeah, we're living in an interesting time.
Well, okay, so we have effectively told everyone what to watch out for in the year. Oh wait, yeah, there's apparently going to be a presidential election. Bah.
Oh, really? I didn't even know.
How much? So what interesting?
People pay attention.
Interesting thing is, like, think how much has changed in 8 years, right? It's like there was from 1945 through, I guess. Well, okay, so what we didn't do. I like when we have a plan and then we just ignore it. I had these yearbooks from some in my mom's house, and we're not going to do this, right? This is the World Book, right? And I had pulled out the World Books for 1975, 1985, 1995, because 1975 was the oldest one we had, and so I was going to think, just like, what would it be like to read back through the layers. I have lived through a number of apparent watersheds, right? It's like 1971, which I didn't understand, right? I was 6, right? But we go off the gold standard, whatever. Okay, fine. My dad served in Thailand during the Vietnam, whatever it was, which apparently was the reason that Nixon took us off the gold standard, because he needed money for the guns and couldn't get it otherwise. I lived through the moon landing, whichever, the Cold War, the fall of the wall, the 9/11, all of this. It will be very interesting if, looking back on all of this was all just one moment, right? From 1945 to whatever we consider the end of it, of the time of the American Empire and the ways in which it was using its military power to control its markets, and everything I've grown up with and lived with through since 1965 is about to evaporate. So never mind 1975, 1985, 1995, right? It's more like going from 1098, when Jerusalem is captured, to 1187 when it falls to Saladin. And you can spend that entire near century thinking, yes, Jerusalem is a Christian city. Not anymore.
Yeah.
And then various horrible misadventures, right? So I think one of the more interesting things I've not sure where I saw this, and I can't reference it, but that the date for the fall of the Roman Empire is 476. That gets cemented in the historiography as the date for the fall of the Roman Empire, because under Justinian, it is used as an excuse for why Justinian's army should go back to Italy and devastate it in order to reclaim it for the empire. So here's sort of the prediction that is actually most terrifying is some other part of the American Empire decides to restore the American Empire. That's when we're really in trouble. Because then they're going to say, oh, yes, the American Empire, it actually fell in 2016, and we're, therefore, we have to go back and restore it. Good luck with that. Didn't work for Justinian either. But then he got hit by a plague, so... The horror of being a historian is you have too many examples in your head all at the same time, and they're jostling for attention. It's very hard when you're living through the period to see what the markers are going to be for the future, looking back on it. It's like in your own life, right? It's like, when was that significant thing? And the thing is, the thing you may experience as significant at the time may or may not turn out to be the thing that actually defines your entire character. Yes. It is going to be interesting as we watch in the next year and several years what things start to become clearer for us that were significant, which we didn't understand. And that's been happening for me a lot in the last few years, obviously. It's like suddenly, oh, that's why that was important. Oh, I was dumb not to see that. But most of the time, people at the time, you can have some awareness of a feel of what's going on, but the throwaway wisdom that you don't write history until it's like at least 50 years in the past is actually helpful, because it's saying we don't actually know what matters most at the time. The big crisis thing that everybody thought was the most important thing that had ever happened is totally forgotten in a few years. And this other thing that nobody was paying attention to is suddenly seen to be more significant. It's perilous making predictions, because you never know whether you're projecting off of something that's immediate and gripping, or whether you're picking up on an actual long-term trend that has teeth. And also all of that I get so sick of, well, if things continue as this, it'll be there. It's like, nothing goes in a straight line. Stop it. If trends continue, if trends continue at, up to the way, it was getting darker and darker and darker until last week, we'd be completely dark. And guess what? It's getting lighter now. It's going to be summer eventually. And if trends continue, we'd burn up in the sun. No, wait, it's going to, it's like, stop trying to project
linear seasons.
Yes, linear seasons.
Yeah.
When probably you haven't taken all of the elements of the system into account.
It's wise advice.
And read more history, which we are going to continue to do in Draco Chemicus. In the Mosaic Arc, we will afflict you with history as we read and barely digest it before we talk to you about it. And then you go read the book.
Yes. Should we plug the website so everyone can have a look? I think we should.
You think we can? How about this for a prediction? Can we get better at promoting our own work in 2024?
Next year, we'll actually tell people to subscribe.
And then we might actually have enough money to mail the books. No, we'll figure that. We'll figure that out before then. Yes. So if you've enjoyed the witty conversation and the possibility to like get us to say your name on camera, subscribe to Unauthorized TV with the Logos and History subscription, because that one helps our channel the most, and helps us pay for our actual human artists, which is a good thing. If you go to our website, dragoncommonroom.com, you can see our ongoing growing list of references and bibliography, because we're always reading more and always trying to put more of the pieces into the mosaic that we are charting for you in our explorations here. We have many books for sale through our links in our shop. You can buy them at Amazon. You can buy them at Barnes & Noble. Some of our books are available in local bookstores, which will help you support St. John Cantius Church and Church Militant. We're still praying for Church Militant that they can survive the collapse of their reputation right now. Michael Boris, pray for everyone involved there. They've helped us a lot. They've been selling Aurora Borealis, and we've had some help from them in editing and publishing. If I remembered everything.
Sign up to the newsletter.
Sign up to the newsletter, and you will get. We just had a very successful coloring competition. Some beautiful entries of all ages, and it's wonderful seeing Colleen's pictures in color, rainbow colors. There were lots of rainbow colors. They were very, very beautiful. We should be having more competitions over the next year, but we got to figure out some of these logistical problems of shipping and collecting addresses, right? Someone pointing out to me, if you're running competitions and you suddenly can find people in their actual physical space, that creates new problems for us living here merely in the internet.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, we had things we haven't considered before that we need to, it's like pirates show up on your doorstep. You may or may not want us. So you can find us online. Please subscribe to Unauthorized TV. .tv. Please join our newsletter. Check out all of our wonderful merch. We have puzzles and paperweights and a lamp. I want someone to buy the lamp, right? The City of Light lamp.
Yes.
Oh, and Casey says, if you're a backer of our Kickstarter and haven't sent your address, please give us your address so we can send you the things once we figure out how to charge everybody. Send us gold anyway, and then we can make more art.
Yeah, basically.
Well, I don't know. I mean, now that we've learned the source of the mining and the stuff, we may just have to go for straight alchemy here. We're not sure whether we're comfortable with this anymore. Human relations that enable us to make more art. That's what we're really, we definitely want to cultivate those. Yes, absolutely. So, well, we will see you next time in the new year after 123 next Sunday night. And we're very grateful to everyone who's joined us in our journey this year in 2023. And no matter what happens, our Lord Jesus Christ loves us. We have a Redeemer. We are not in debt to him. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Thanks you for joining us. Now, if I could play the outro correctly, right? It's like, do I have any tech skills left? Good night, everyone.